AEW Collision premiered in June 2023, and the original premise for AEW Collision was that it was more or less the show for the backstage troublemakers of AEW, as AEW would enforce a loose roster split for AEW Collision, as the show was headed by CM Punk, and some of the biggest stars on AEW Collision at that time included Miro, Andrade, Ricky Starks, and Malakai Black, who all had their own various backstage dramas, ranging from wanting to leave the company and being held hostage there, to getting into backstage fights, to allegedly refusing to take losses. And it's crazy that not even 2 years later, every single name I just listed and all the main characters of CM Punk's AEW Collision are now in the WWE. So how did this happen? What was all the drama that all these wrestlers found themselves in, and how did they find their way out of AEW and to WWE? Well, like the video and let's talk about all of that today. Andrade was released from the WWE in March 2021 after he had requested his release a few weeks prior. Andrade had been vocally unhappy about his booking in the WWE and had been treading water and sat in catering for a while by this point, so when he was released from the WWE, naturally everyone knew where his next destination was likely to be. And that, of course, was All Elite Wrestling, which he debuted for on the June 4th, 2021 Dynamite in a pretty awkward debut segment, as he was introduced by Vicky Guerrero and nobody knew what she was saying, and then Andrade just walked out the tunnel. It wasn't the best debut, but he got a pop, and it was exciting to see Andrade in a new environment after some had felt he had been underutilized in the WWE. He'd have his in-ring debut a month later against Matt Sydal, picking up the victory, and then later that month ended his affiliation with Vicky Guerrero already, and then Chavo Guerrero came in to be his new manager. And this was a problem with Andrade from the offset of his AEW career, and that's just that plans were always changing with him, and there was never an outright direction that he was going in. And the other big problem with Andrade's AEW run right from the start was that he wrestled far too occasionally. His next match wouldn't be until 2 months later on the September 10th Rampage episode against Pac, who he had started a feud with, and while this match was amazing, right after it, Andrade turned on Chavo Guerrero, and now Jose the assistant was his manager. It's been 3 months and he's already on his third manager. Regardless though, Andrade early on was being presented as a top guy and was involved in big angles and matches, such as the Casino ladder match and his continued feud with Pac, which was meant to lead to his pay-per-view debut at All Out against him, but due to travel issues, the match was removed from the card, and the two wrestled their rematch on Rampage, with Pac winning this time. And following this feud with Pac, Andrade would enter the Codyverse. He'd start feuding with Cody Rhodes, whilst Cody was also simultaneously feuding with Malakai Black, and the feud kicked off with Andrade getting a big win over Cody on the November 3rd Dynamite episode. This would finally lead to Andrade getting his pay-per-view debut at Full Gear, as he teamed up with Malakai Black to face Cody Rhodes and Pac in a losing effort. Andrade and Cody would have one more match to finish their story, and this would be a street fight on the December 1st Dynamite episode, which was the infamous match where Cody put himself and Andrade, mainly himself, through a flaming table and picked up the victory over Andrade. Going into the new year, Andrade would enter a new storyline where he would buy 51% of the Hardy family office to make it into the Andrade Hardy family office. Just him and Matt Hardy managing a bunch of random wrestlers. Probably one of the most pointless stables of all time. They'd enter into a storyline where they were trying to recruit Darby Allin into the group, and this saw Andrade get involved in the TNT title division. He'd first faced TNT champ Sammy Guevara on the 25th of February Rampage episode for the title, but lost, and then the next week challenged again, this time in a triple threat match, also involving Darby Allin, and once again lost. And I gotta say, I think this was AEW's biggest fumble with Andrade's AEW run, him not winning the TNT title in this match. I think he should have won it in this match, a lot of people agree, and it could have changed a lot for his AEW run, and a lot of things could be different had he won the TNT title in this match, I believe. At that year's Revolution, he teamed up with Matt Hardy and Isaiah Cassidy to lose to Sam Guevara, Darby Allin, and Sting in a pointless trios match, and he ended his feud with Darby Allin with a loss in a coffin match and disbanded from the AHFO as he was back to doing just nothing again. Andrade was that upper mid-card heel who they never really wanted to pull the trigger on, and was always kind of just there to lose the big feuds to the baby faces, and always lost the rubber match. He would always lose the deciding match in a feud, he'd win the first time and then lose the deciding rematch every single time in every single feud he was in. So yeah, once again, he was back to doing pretty much nothing, and that was until the arrival of Rush and Dragon Lee, as Andrade was reunited with his LFI friends, and they entered into the Trios title tournament and lost in the first round to the Elite. Ouch. He'd wrestled as part of the Casino ladder match at All Out in a losing effort, of course, and then on a cold October night, I logged onto Twitter to see this. You are a jobber, a favor hire. Be grateful, bitch. I said it to your face. If you had a problem with me and you said nothing, I wouldn't beat your ass because I'm a professional. Don't be scared. When I say something, I name names, and I'm not scared to get fired. Hashtag Sammy. You didn't say shit to me, you liar, but here's some truth, you ungrateful prick. You would be jobless if it wasn't for your dad-in-law. Are you really mad at me or mad at yourself for failing to get over for a second time? Just go back to WWE like we all know you want to do, and fuck off. Okay, I'm a liar. See you on Wednesday. I'll tell you to your face again, and nothing you say that you do not have any problem. And hey guys, after these tweets were posted, this back and forth between Andrade and Sammy Guevara on Twitter, can we guess what happened that upcoming Wednesday at the Dynamite tapings? Well, the two turned up to Dynamite on said Wednesday, and of course, had a backstage brawl and got into it. And following the incident, Andrade was suspended from AEW indefinitely, but interestingly, Sammy Guevara avoided punishment, which could almost suggest that Andrade was the instigator and had more to do in the incident than Sammy Guevara did. And of course, based off the tweets between the two, rumors began to circulate that Andrade wanted to return to the WWE, and following this fight, he was off AEW TV for a very long time. In fact, it was nearly a year and he wouldn't return until 2023, and it wasn't until the very beginning of Collision in June 2023 when he would finally make his AEW return as part of that soft AEW roster split that was around for CM Punk's Collision, when they just got all the problem wrestlers and all the wrestlers who had backstage heat onto Collision, and that included Andrade, who was now a regular fixture of Collision, and he'd start wrestling a lot more regularly and picking up victories, but he wasn't really wrestling on any pay-per-view still, and still overall wasn't really doing anything. He wasn't involved in any sort of meaningful programs, he was just kind of there and just wrestling, which is fine. Andrade's a great wrestler, but it seemed like still they had no plans for him. And of course, those rumors of a WWE return were once again still there, with his contract expiring at the end of the year, and those rumors were starting to get a lot more real, as it seemed like Andrade was not staying around in AEW for much longer. He would have one last hurrah in AEW though, as part of the Continental Classic, and honestly, this was the best part of his AEW run. He was wrestling weekly against top guys, the matches were good, he looked good in the matches, and he made it far in the Continental Classic itself. It was a good showing from Andrade in the tournament, and that was all before his final match at World's End, where he lost to Miro, ending a feud between the two of them, and it was confirmed post-show that this was Andrade's final match, and he was going into free agency. And sure enough, he would of course return to the WWE like we all knew he was going to at the 2024 Royal Rumble, and it looks like he's there to stay now. Ricky Starks has been in AEW for nearly 5 years now. He signed for AEW during the pandemic in 2020 and had a solid few years in AEW, being part of Team Taz, facing Sting, winning the tag titles, feuding with CM Punk and beating him being some of his biggest moments in the company. However, throughout Ricky Starks' entire AEW run, his push hasn't been consistent, and AEW have constantly failed to capitalize on his momentum and push him to the next level when there were opportunities to do so. His last match in AEW took place on the March 30th AEW Collision, as he teamed with Big Bill and they took on Top Flight in a tournament match. A match that Ricky Starks and Big Bill were actually supposed to win, but the match had to be cut off early, with Top Flight instead taking the win after there were fears that Ricky Starks may have got concussed. And as per protocol, the finish was rushed, with Top Flight now being the winners. However though, this ended up just being a false alarm and just a concussion scare, and though they followed protocol correctly, Ricky Starks did not have a concussion and thus was cleared to compete again. But since this moment, Ricky Starks has not been seen or heard from on AEW TV since. And the reason for why Ricky Starks has never been used by AEW has never been explicitly known. However, there are obviously many theories. There were some reports that Ricky Starks had rejected plans for a return, but these were denied by Starks himself. And many speculate the reason why Ricky Starks is in AEW purgatory is because AEW expects him to leave the company to join WWE at some point, and clearly don't see him as a long-term guy. Though there are mixed reports on when his contract in AEW is up, and he's been on the shelf for a while now. Regardless of any speculation though, whenever Ricky Starks has ever been asked about why he's been kept off TV, he has always said he has no idea why, and no reason was ever given. And this all brings us to where we are now, as like I said, Ricky Starks has been on the shelf for 8 months, and on November 23rd, Ricky Starks would take matters into his own hands when he found work elsewhere himself and would appear for GCW. And in his return promo for GCW, he would address his absence from AEW, stating that he wasn't going to sit at home and let his career dwindle. And with that, more GCW matches and appearances were announced for Ricky Starks, as well as other indie appearances even being announced for GCW's upcoming Hammerstein Ballroom show, a topic that we will definitely get onto later. And then 2 days later, everything would kick off when Ricky Starks appeared on Chris Van Vliet's YouTube channel for an interview, and he had a lot to say about his AEW career. He reaffirms that he's clear and healthy and has no idea why he's been left sitting at home for as long as he has. He then discusses the time it was leaked that he visited Cody Rhodes at the Royal Rumble last year, and talks about how he was confronted by an unnamed AEW wrestler about it.
You know what's so funny about that whole situation? First off, yes, I did go see a friend of mine for his match, obviously, because it was an hour away. So I remember the next day, Sunday, I woke up and like this whole thing was blowing up. And I was just like, what is this? I had people from my job being like, I had one guy, he was just like, were you at the Rumble last night? I said, yeah, and what the fuck about it? What about it? He goes, just saying that's a bad look, you know? I said, how is it a bad look? I can't control somebody taking the security footage while I'm walking to a bus. I don't control that. Like, how is that? Tell me how that is a bad look. We got people on our own program talking about other people at the other company, but yet me having my security footage exposed is a bad look? Give me a break.
And when he was asked about his comparisons to The Rock, it would lead to Starks talking about another incident that Ricky Starks had in AEW with another AEW wrestler.
He did. You know what he called me? Do you remember?
A vanilla midget.
He called me a vanilla midget rock ripoff. You might as well call me a great heel. And I even hate saying and talking like this, but you might as well call me a great heel because I got somebody so flustered on live TV that they stumbled and stuttered their way into one of the worst insults that you could say. That's so, passe, so 2000s. A vanilla midget. I could have hit him with the, I'm black, you idiot, but I didn't at the time. You know what I'm saying? I could have did that. I didn't. Personally, out of all that, I don't think that Ricky Starks came out of that looking very bad. You know what I'm saying? I think it wasn't me that looked bad in that whole situation.
If you're unsure who Ricky Starks or what Ricky Starks is referring to here, he's talking about the time that Adam Copeland, aka Edge, went off script on him. On the October 14th, 2023 Collision, Ricky Starks made a comment to Copeland that seemingly annoyed him, leading to Copeland calling him a vanilla midget rock ripoff in a moment that was definitely not scripted and that he stumbled his words on the way to. And for the rest of the interview, he talks about CM Punk in AEW, fake news surrounding why he was gone, like the rumors of being difficult to work with and rejecting plans. And yeah man, I'd recommend you just go ahead and watch the full interview for yourself. I'll link it down below. But it would then all kick off further yesterday, as obviously all these clips started getting posted and quoted, and more matches for Ricky Starks in GCW were being announced, until it was then reported last night that AEW had pulled Ricky Starks from his GCW appearances and he would not be appearing for the brand going forward. And many speculated that this had happened due to the comments that had gone viral about his time in AEW and the whole Chris Van Vliet interview and whatnot, and the fact that AEW's misuse of him was being used as storyline in GCW, but later on, some clarity was posted and reported on for why Ricky Starks had been pulled from GCW dates. It was said that Starks was only being blocked from his GCW date and was still allowed to work other independent wrestling dates, and can still take bookings from other indie wrestling companies. It's just GCW that AEW were now drawing a line in the sand between, with now no AEW talent at all allowed to appear for GCW anymore. And this has nothing to do with Ricky Starks and the comments that were made by him, but rather due to the comments made by GCW wrestler Effie, who discussed how AEW were running the Hammerstein Ballroom not too long after GCW were, and made various comments about Tony Khan and his relationship with his father Shad Khan. Apparently there was exception taken to these words said, and the line has now been drawn in the sand as I previously said, so the entire situation is just a mess, and I can't imagine it's made relations between Starks and AEW any better, as it's cost him bookings when he's still not being used for AEW as it is. Rusev was released from the WWE on April 15th, 2020 as part of budget cuts, and Rusev had been in the WWE system since 2010, and his run in the WWE overall was quite good. Especially the first few years from his main roster call-up were great, but towards the end of it he was definitely being misused, as WWE had failed to capitalize on him multiple times and Rusev was unhappy in the company, having requested his own release multiple times with WWE rejecting it before finally he was released in the budget cuts. And from the moment he was released from WWE, everyone knew exactly what was gonna happen next, and of course, on the September 9th episode of AEW Dynamite, the former Rusev, now known as Miro, would make his AEW debut. Upon his debut, he aligned himself with Kip Sabian and Penelope Ford as their best man for their wedding, and the start of Miro's run in AEW was actually just kinda weird. He essentially pretty much had the gimmick of a gamer, and he was always playing an arcade machine at ringside, and a feud would kick off with the Best Friends stable in October after they accidentally broke the arcade cabinet, and this feud would, over an arcade machine, go on for months and months. I kid you not, this feud lasted about 6 months and it was all over an arcade machine. Miro would make his pay-per-view debut for AEW at Revolution 2021 in March, as himself and Kip Sabian defeated Orange Cassidy and Chuck Taylor, but on the March 31st episode of Dynamite weeks later, they would rematch in an Anarchy arcade tag match, which was essentially just like a 2v2 street fight but with arcade machines scattered all around the ringside area. It sounds wacky, and it definitely was, but it was a great match, and though Best Friends got the win to end the feud on top, it was definitely Miro's best match in AEW thus far, and it was good that this feud had finally ended, and it was time for Miro to do something else finally. As shortly after this, Miro would turn on Kip Sabian after attacking him, and Miro would become a lot more aggressive, dominant, and reawakened as a competitor. Miro soon after in May would challenge Darby Allin for his TNT title, and Miro would come out on top to win his first and only title in AEW. And Miro's TNT title reign was generational, legit one of my favorite TNT title reigns and one of my favorite ever title reigns in AEW. Miro during this run would start referring to himself as God's favorite champion, thanking his God for his dominance in matches, and sporting a beautiful custom TNT title belt. Miro defended on TV against the likes of Dante Martin, Evil Uno, Brian Pillman Jr., Fuego del Sol, and others, and also defended it on pay-per-view against Lance Archer and Eddie Kingston at Double or Nothing and All Out respectively. Miro would hold the title up until the 29th of September AEW Dynamite, when he lost it to Sammy Guevara, which in my opinion was a bad decision. Miro lost it way too early into his run, and the TNT title did pretty much go to shit after this, so yeah, not a great decision. After this, Miro would go off TV for a little bit of time, but would return to enter the Full Gear World Title Eliminator Tournament in November, as he filled in for Jon Moxley. He defeated Orange Cassidy in the semi-finals, but in the finals was defeated by Bryan Danielson. And then after this, Miro would take even more time away to deal with a hamstring injury and other projects away from wrestling. He'd return in June of 2022, just in time to qualify for a 4-way match at Forbidden Door to crown the first ever All-Atlantic champion. This match was of course won by Pac, and after this, Miro's appearances with AEW would be more sparse again, as he essentially disappeared again until the build-up to All Out, when he was randomly booked in a 6-man tag alongside Darby and Sting as they defeated the House of Black at All Out in a very random match like I said. And then after this, Miro would disappear off TV again, and this time for even longer than before, and not because of any injury. Miro would go absent for months again unexplained after All Out, and it was reported that the reason for this was that AEW didn't have any creative plans for him, and then later it was reported that Miro had actually turned down creative plans for a return. The plan involved Miro returning in a battle royal where he would finish runner-up, losing to Adam Page, but he turned it down, which definitely didn't speed up his return. Miro's return wouldn't take place all the way until the May 10th, 2023 Dynamite, an over 8-month absence. And a week later, AEW would announce their new weekly show Collision, and with that came a loose roster split being enforced, with certain guys and girls being exclusive to Collision, including Miro. Basically, AEW just put all the backstage troublemakers on Collision at the start of it. Miro would get going on Collision and start picking up steam, but quickly once again, it seemed like AEW had no plans for him, as at first he was just squashing people, and then his wrestling appearances became more occasional once again. He would start a feud with Powerhouse Hobbs in the lead up to All In/All Out, which felt like his first proper program in ages, and they had a match at All Out, which ended up being an awesome match and potentially the match of the night, as the crowd was super hot for the slapping of meat. He'd continue on through the end of the year and would start feuding with Andrade, who had Miro's wife at the time, CJ Perry, by his side, aka the former Lana from WWE, and the two had a match set for the World's End pay-per-view at the end of the year, which was set to be Andrade's final AEW match. And Miro would pick up the victory in this match with help from CJ Perry, but right after this, can you guess what happened? Well, of course, Miro disappeared from AEW TV once again, and we haven't seen him since. Miro took to social media to say he had been working injured since September, and after this, he was then taken off TV, which is puzzling because why was he working with an injury for that long? And Miro did clarify that this was a shoulder injury that he was recovering from. Miro would remain off TV for the entirety of 2024, and in September, it came out that Miro had actually requested his release from AEW. So the former Aleister Black made his AEW debut on the July 7th, 2021 episode of AEW Dynamite, attacking Cody Rhodes in a shocking moment. He was now under the new persona of Malakai Black and would defeat Cody Rhodes in his debut AEW match for a huge win, which of course was then undone when Cody Rhodes beat him numerous times thereafter in classic Codyverse fashion. Then in early 2022, he'd start teaming with Brody King and eventually Buddy Matthews to form the House of Black stable, being joined by Julia Hart afterwards as well. This is the stable that Malakai has been part of ever since they formed all the way back then, with the House of Black being former AEW Trios champions, but despite that still having quite a strange and inconsistent run in AEW, more on that later. Malakai Black's AEW career has felt pretty underwhelming overall, and so news of Malakai leaving AEW isn't very surprising, and another reason why it isn't very surprising is because it's been rumored multiple times and always been kinda widely accepted that he most likely isn't gonna stay in AEW. The thing with Malakai Black's AEW run is that it's been full of constant drama over the past few years now. Matter of fact, Malakai Black has tried to leave AEW before, and this isn't the first time that there were rumors floating around he was no longer in the company. In September 2022, reports came out that Malakai Black had been granted a conditional release from AEW following a prior release request from the previous month in August, which had been denied. The conditions weren't known, but it was known that it was a heavily conditional release. At least that's what was reported. Malakai Black would then release his own statement a week or so later, where he would confirm that he did indeed request his AEW release amidst having some personal and private issues behind the scenes. He had also recently revealed he'd been dealing with a back injury for the better part of a year. Part of the statement reads, "I did indeed ask for my release. The last 2 years of my life have lended to a lot of setbacks. Both me and my wife have been affected by uncontrollable actions from the outside that resulted in loss of life, medical setbacks, career jeopardizing, the suicide of a close friend and a close family member almost losing their life, then experiencing an injury that I was sure was the end of my career. I spend every week going through several sessions of rehab, dry needling and therapy just to be able to walk and compete. Now, this being the tip of the iceberg, and with the combination of the promises in my professional field that were not upheld, which resulted as a combination of all of these to a complete demoralization of life and career. This decision has been in my mind for the past 6 months. Safe to say, Malakai Black was going through a lot personally and seemingly internally with the company as well. He also goes on to say in this statement that reports of there being a conditional release were false, amongst other reports and rumors. Lastly, I have read a few narratives online in regards to my release, mental health and my personal life that I can summarize swiftly. If it didn't come from me, it didn't happen. Stuff about conditional releases, stuff in my marriage, or using said mental health to leverage the other, when, as I said before, that part wasn't even going to be part of the public conversation, are false. Then, to make matters more confusing, Malakai took to Instagram Live on September 27th to further clarify how he had actually not been released by AEW and was not departing the company, despite most reports indicating he had been conditionally released. Malakai said this was not the case and AEW had not granted him his release.
My stuff about my conditional release, that it's false. So how are you guys still thinking, why are people still writing that I've gotten my release? Guys, I don't know how why do you trust these people to tell you the truth? None of it's confirmed. There's no confirmation because I haven't left. I'm not luckily I've been, and that's what this whole thing was about, I've been giving time off by Tony to take care of a bunch of stuff. All this stuff has been cleared up like weeks ago.
It was a strange scenario, but things went silent on it more or less, and Malakai Black would return a few months later and he'd continue on in AEW like nothing ever happened. But that wouldn't stop the drama in Malakai Black's AEW career, as in the next September in 2023, a cursed month, September for Malakai Black apparently, fans noticed something weird about Malakai Black's AEW career, and that's that it had been over a full year and a half since Malakai Black had had a singles match in AEW and had only had 10 singles matches in his entire AEW career. Fans speculated that this was because of his back injury that we mentioned previously, and that he was in a trio with the House of Black to protect him and those injuries, which Malakai Black himself would then take to Instagram to refute and say this wasn't true, his back was fine now, and he had no idea why AEW wasn't booking him in singles matches, before going on to state he has other injuries too. And this trend of no singles matches for Malakai Black in AEW continued until February 2024, when Malakai was finally booked in an AEW singles match nearly 2 years since the last one. Conversations around Malakai's lack of singles matches reignited drama once again at the start of 2024 though, as on New Year's Day 2024, AEW fans were responding Malakai Black's lack of one-on-ones. Here's how many singles matches each House of Black member competed in throughout 2023. Julia Hart 14, Brody King 8, Buddy Matthews 6, Malakai Black 0. That's what happens when you refuse to take a pin or put anyone over. This reply in particular here, accusing Malakai Black of refusing to do the JOB in AEW, would prompt a response from the King of the Black Throne himself. Usually I don't reply because these laughable takes from goofballs like this nerd is why this place is the equivalent of people opening their front doors and screaming their excrement-laced opinions into the street. However, bullshit. Never happened, isn't a thing. Happy New Year. So the new narrative was that Malakai Black was difficult to work with, and that very much played into why Malakai's run had been a bust. These claims were further denied by House of Black member Brody King as well, and throughout 2024 Malakai would stay wrestling in trios and tag action with the occasional singles match, with his last AEW singles match taking place on the 6th of November Dynamite against Adam Cole, where after the match Malakai seemingly breaks character to have a moment and embrace Adam Cole after being defeated by him, leading many fans to speculate that Malakai was done with AEW and was departing the company. However, Malakai would then come out once again to say no, this isn't the case.
Match down, and again, everybody is, oh, he's retiring. He's retiring because of his injuries and this and that. Well, neither of these things. I'm not injured, nor am I retiring, nor am I leaving.
And he continued wrestling as normal for AEW. What is going on? His actual last match for AEW would be later that month at Full Gear, and he's not been seen in the months since. And in those months, both Brody King and Buddy Matthews, the members of House of Black, have been encouraged to leave the House of Black in promos and forge their own paths. And after it happens the past week with Buddy Matthews on AEW Dynamite after his match with Will Ospreay, it reopens the conversation about Malakai Black's status with AEW, which takes us to where we are now, where it was revealed recently that the AEW locker room is under the belief that Malakai Black is gone from AEW, and that's the reason for these promos and this current storyline with Buddy Matthews and Brody King. And yeah, as I said at the start of the video, all of these guys have now made it to WWE. Andrade returned at the 2024 WWE Royal Rumble. Ricky Starks debuted earlier this year as Ricky Saints in NXT, and he is the North American champion. And Rusev and Aleister Black made their respective returns on the Raw and SmackDown after WrestleMania this year, with obviously CM Punk being there, having been waiting there from November 2023 from Survivor Series when he made his return there. So yeah, basically what I'm saying is WWE is CM Punk's Collision confirmed.